I'll say this. Kelvin is my shepherd. Yeah, obviously I am giving major props to Lions defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepherd, coming off of what was a virtuoso masterpiece, a perfect game that was just pitched by the Detroit Lions defense on a day in which they had all the excuses in the world without their entire starting secondary. An amazing performance, and we are going to talk all about that. Welcome into I'll Say This. I am Chris Castellani. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's show, at Castellani2014 on Twitter, hit that like button on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're available in audio form on Apple Podcasts, available in audio form on Spotify, and of course, go to castellanicontent.com, and you will find all of the content that Austin and I are creating every day. You can watch every single Lions video, every Tiger video. It's all archived for you in one place on there. So check out castellanicontent.com. All right, let's jump into it, man. The Lions just knocked off the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in potentially what could end up being a preview of the NFC Championship. I mean, that's how well both of these teams have played up to this point this season. And if the NFC Championship goes the way that tonight's game went, I'm going to feel pretty good about the Lions. Look, the Lions came in favored. And the thing about Detroit, and Brad Holmes deserves a brunt of the credit for this. You know, Brad Holmes has assembled such a good and deep roster that even on days when they're banged up, and they were banged up to shit coming into today, especially defensively, you still feel like every game is winnable just because they have so many weapons. Now, the way that I thought this game would go would be with the Bucs scoring a lot of points, and hopefully the Lions scoring just a few more points. I expected a shootout. You had two accurate quarterbacks. You had two very explosive offenses. You had Baker Mayfield, who'd been playing some of the best football of his career. And after that first drive in which the Lions just ran right up the field and scored, you were kind of getting the impression that maybe this could be, this was going to be one of those shootouts. And this is where I'll just throw a little negative out there. Not the best game offensively. Not John Morton's best game as the offensive coordinator. Not Jared Goff's best game. They had opportunities, really, with the way the defense was playing. This could have been a 21, 28, or even 35-0 game at halftime. I mean, that's how dominant this thing was. It ended up being 14-3 going into the half, which was frustrating. Obviously, the Bucs come out. They score to kind of make things interesting. Lions end up establishing a drive. And then after that, I mean, you saw what I saw, which was a defense playing with guys. I mean, I'm just going to be real here. And maybe I shouldn't do this because it makes me seem unintelligent. I hadn't heard of some of these guys. I hadn't seen some of these guys. They brought it up on the broadcast. There were dudes in the secondary who were seeing their first action of the season, right? Not guys who had been backups that had, were coming into play a little bit, but no, guys who hadn't seen a snap, that were coming in against a team that was red hot, that as of the time the game started had the best record in the NFC, and they just didn't break all night. And I think it started with the fact that in the early part of the game, I think that Tampa's offensive line was surprised by the pressure that was being applied. Obviously, you had Aiden Hutchinson doing his thing, but so good to have Aleem McNeil back. And they weren't really able to get into any sort of rhythm. You've seen Tampa be very successful this year with that great receiving core they have. Obviously, you wish Mike Evans the best. He gets injured there, but they've hit him. Mbuka had been just a revelation and will continue to be. I mean, the guy's going to be a wonderful player, but you were expecting those chunk plays. You were expecting those blown coverages or somebody to miss an assignment in the gap, and you just never saw it all night. And, was there anything super spectacular? Well, kind of. I mean, they forced 2 turnovers. That's pretty amazing. But in the second half, all it was just good fundamental plays. And this is something I've complained about with Michigan in the past. It's something I've praised them for as well during the Harbaugh era. But to me, one of the true signs of a really well-coached team is just those little things in the discipline. Avoiding penalties, avoiding dumb mistakes. If you have a chance to wrap a guy up in the open field, you make that tackle. Because if you don't tackle him at that after he gets 5 yards, he might end up getting 35 yards. And it felt like every time there was a 50-50 play, every time there was a moment the Lions needed to make a tackle, needed to have a pass breakup, needed to avoid a penalty, it felt like they did it. And you saw Baker Mayfield, who, even at his worst, and I love Baker, but even when he struggled, is about as confident a quarterback as there is, come into this game or come away from this game as frustrated as you're going to see. I mean, he was yelling at the ref. He was looking for just somebody to blame, quite frankly, with the way that things were going. And it was one of those instances where they got so in his head in the first half that by the time the second half rolled around, he had a few open guys. I mean, quite a few times, whether it was Johnson or Ibuka, it didn't matter. He was missing high. And I think that is the result of some unexpected pressure that was applied on him in the first half. They really were not able to get any sort of run game going at all. There wasn't really any opportunity for them to play balanced football. They're playing from behind the entire time. And I think so much of this, and you give credit to the players. You give credit to Whiteside and Amik Robertson, who always seems like he's up to the challenge. Guys that aren't expected to be superstars who played superstar caliber games. But to me, I think that this is now a solid sample size where Dan Campbell might have just hired the stud of all studs with Kelvin Shepherd. And look, we liked Aaron Glenn as a guy, and he was clearly super passionate about, playing winning football and bought into the culture here. But let's be honest, there were moments where Aaron Glenn wasn't always the most reliable defensive coordinator. And look, he earned his head coaching job, and what he's doing with the Jets, I take nothing out of that, right? Like that means nothing in terms of as far as the job that he did here. But I mean, I don't think you ever saw him put together a defensive performance quite like what the defense did against Baltimore this year when they had Lamar, or quite like what the defense did on this Monday night game against Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. Maybe the only thing that's comparable is probably the Week 18 game against Minnesota last year. But even then, that Sam Darnold's a much more beatable quarterback than Baker is. And you saw it tonight, just on full display, a defense that was totally engaged. And I brought this up in the post-game video as well, but it's such a testament to the culture here, because it would be easy to point fingers. It'd be easy to be woe is me. And I've seen this with teams in the past where, you feel like maybe it's just not our night. And they had more injuries to the secondary today. You had Yasin leaving the game with injury, right? And they found a way to make it work. They found a way to make it work consistently. And they put pressure on Baker, and they forced turnovers, and they played behind what was an energized crowd at Ford Field. And you obviously, look, that's as good a home field advantage as there is. But at the same time, man, I mean, this team could play a game at a McDonald's ball pit, and they'd still find a way to try to scratch and claw their way through it. And look, I know they're coming off a loss. They just lost to Kansas City in a game where they didn't play their tightest game. I view it much more as just kind of the perils of the NFL. You go to Arrowhead and lose. I mean, do you see what Kansas City did to the Raiders this week? They're still pretty damn good. They're still a championship caliber team with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. To bounce back the way that they have, and this is one more thing about Dan Campbell that I think has made him an exceptional coach. This team, knock on wood here, they do not make the same mistakes in back-to-back weeks. And I think that is really telling, that they do not let the frustrations from one game trickle over into the next. I mean, you're coming off of a day or a Sunday game in which you had one of your best players suspended for a boneheaded move, slapping, a Juju Smith-Schuster, gets himself suspended. And, I think that if you want to look at what these players love about Dan Campbell, and you want to look at why Dan Campbell is so revered in the National Football League, the way that he handled that Brian Branch situation. I think Corey Woods tweeted about this, and he's absolutely correct. The fact that Campbell was open about criticizing Brian Branch for what he did, but never throwing him under the bus. He never used those buzzwords that people love to use. He still said, hey, we love this guy. He made a mistake. And Branch immediately owned up to it. Again, man, culture, accountability, responsibility. These are things that you've seen here. And look, there are teams in this city, in this state, that will frustrate the hell out of me just because you'll see stops and starts. And I talk about the positive culture in Detroit for the Tigers all the time. But the one thing that I just love about this Lions group, and I don't care if this ends with them winning the Super Bowl or if it ends with them missing the playoffs, I will say this every single week, is the fact that I have zero doubt that every person in that organization is 100% committed to winning right now. There's no maybe next year. There's nobody to build up through the farm system. They are playing to win today because they just had a game in which their entire secondary was injured, and it didn't freaking matter. No excuses, no finger pointing. It is a big reason why people have fallen in love with this team. They lead up front. And the coaching staff deserves a ton of credit for that, and these players deserve a ton of credit for their buy-in. And yeah, I mean, this is how impressed I was with the defense. There's a lot of things I could complain about with the offense. I mean, they really should have stuck the knife in early in that game. Didn't matter. You're playing a good team. Dan Campbell said it before. You don't apologize for wins in this league. It's hard to win in this league, and to do that against a quality opponent in Tampa Bay, that's going to raise some eyebrows. We knew this team was good, but And look, man, I don't want to put, get people too excited. That's a game you highlight on the Super Bowl DVD because it was just that impressive a defensive performance. All right, let's talk about some of our college teams. Let's start with Michigan. Obviously, they got a win on Saturday against Washington in a game they had to have, game they needed. I mean, for all the drama that is coming out of East Lansing with what is going to be in store for the future of their coach, I mean, I think we could have started to have some of those legit arguments or discussions when it comes to Sharon Moore had Michigan have lost that game against Washington. And when you look at the box score, Michigan was completely prepared. And in many ways, Michigan was completely dominant. As is often the case with these Sharon Moore teams, it's the little things, and they made a lot of mistakes. Drop passes, ridiculous again. You had a 4th and 2 in the red zone that you could have converted, but you had a very predictable run play where you got stuffed. You had a missed field goal. Dom Zavad all of a sudden becoming a problem. He's 8 for 12 now on the season. It's really frustrating. And the game was 7-7 relatively deep into the ball game, but I thought Michigan's defense was fantastic. They forced turnovers. I think this Washington team, I don't think they're that bad. I just think they were completely overwhelmed. And it's one of those games where I've been watching Michigan football long enough, and there was a time, maybe in the early to mid 2010s in the Hoke era, where the whole discrepancy of talent argument, especially as it pertained to the Ohio State rivalry, was maybe a bit fair. But I've watched enough Michigan football now to know that, man, there's always talent in this program. There's always defensive talent. There's always offensive talent. And what matters more is coaching. And it seemed like there had been frustrations, especially after the USC game, which was just a gutter ball. If they were playing bowling, it's a gutter ball. It was a poor offensive performance. It was a poor defensive performance. It was a poor coaching performance. And I was worried, honestly, that Washington would watch that USC game and have the template for how to beat Michigan, which is you take their pass rush out of the game. That's not what happened. I thought Michigan's pass rush, I can never say that. Pass rush was legit. I thought their secondary looked very good, forcing the turnovers. But look, you got to score points. And despite the drop passes, which, I mean, we're 7 games in, so I feel like this team kind of is what they are at this point. But man, oh man, I mean, Bryce Underwood, I thought played great. And I would say if you want to blame him for his lack of touch on one of those passes, sure. But I want to say he was 21 for 27 with 3 legitimate drops. I mean, for a freshman quarterback to be that accurate, I think it was very impressive. And we've criticized the receiving corps, and they've earned that criticism. I do think it's better, much better than it was a year ago, but it's where you have to give credit to the youngsters. Andrew Marsh stepping up. Him and McCauley are the number 1 guys right now. Marsh obviously had the one-handed grab that was really incredible on Saturday, but he made plays, had the screen pass for a touchdown. And one thing that I will say about this team in defense of them, and also in defense of the coaching staff, they're a young squad. I mean, you have a true freshman quarterback starting for you. And I understand that there's a ton of hype coming in with Underwood. I get it. But just because you come in with hype and just because you come in making money doesn't guarantee you that you're going to see success and that you're not going to go through growing pains. And Bryce has obviously had to do that. I don't think that this is a receiving core that coming into the year you could have considered elite. Guys have had to step up. And I think that Sharon is aware of the fact that, you got to just play the talent at this point. This isn't one of those things when you look at your main guys. I mean, Samaj has been in the program for several years, but he can't stop dropping passes. McCauley's first year in the program, though obviously he played at Indiana for a while. Andrew Marsh is a true freshman. You got to play where the talent is, and you got to throw the ball to where the talent is, especially because you're down 2 tight ends. Shout out to some of these other guys for really stepping up. I mean, you had 2 tight ends that hadn't gotten any reps basically all season that made some plays. Yes, you had 1 drop, but I think that this is a positive of the Sharon Moore era, which is I think that they're going to play some of their best football when being doubted. I feel like you look at a game like Nebraska, which was a good win for them, a solid victory on the road, a game that a lot of people thought was kind of a 50-50 game. You come away from that and you're thinking, God, this team must be pretty good, right? They played 2 bad games. They had a lame duck win against Wisconsin, who's terrible. They had a loss against USC, and all of a sudden we're having those same discussions that we've had before about, is this the right coach? Is this the right regime? Are these the right players? And I thought they played a much, much better game against Washington. And I still have my criticisms and concerns with Sharon, and I think that they're very legitimate because, to me, when this team struggles, even on days where they play well, they have a lot of the characteristics of a poorly coached team, whether it's penalties or lack of discipline, fundamental mistakes, that stuff still exists. They're able to overcome that because they do have a ton of talent. and they showed that off on Saturday. But for the time being, look, what is true is you are now entering what is far and away the softest part of your schedule. And like, I don't really like to do this necessarily because I think you set yourself up for being wrong, but you will be probably heavily favored in every game that you have the rest of the way until Ohio State. Obviously, Ohio State's going to be different, which means if you win that Ohio State game again, you are at best in the playoff, at worst possibly finding yourself back in Indy for the Big Ten championship. I don't think that this team has that in them. I really don't. I think that they're better than they were a year ago, but until they clean up the sloppiness, I'm going to be inclined to believe that they're going to lose to a lot of their quality opponents. And I'm going to just kind of maintain that belief. But Saturday was definitely a step in the right direction. Man, big shout out to Jordan Marshall. And this is where having those two quarterback scheme or two running back systems, man, they just pay off because Justice Haynes is as explosive a back as there is in college football. You lose him for basically 2 full games, and Marshall was just grinding out there over 100 yards, a lot of hard, tough yards that he got behind an offensive line that isn't super experienced. You lose Evan Link, who's one of your more experienced offensive linemen. You're behind the 8 ball, and it didn't really matter. I think this was a prime example of the kind of win that Sharon Moore wants to have at Michigan. It wasn't full of finesse. It wasn't super pretty. But as it got deeper into the game, you saw Michigan wearing down Washington and the defense, which at points has been frustrating because you see the talent here. I thought that they were great. I mean, that was one of the better defensive performances of the Wink Martindale era, just because I think one of the things that has bothered me about Wink as a defensive coordinator is that very often the issues that exist in the first part of a game will exist in the fourth quarter. I feel like they've struggled with making adjustments. This is one of those games. Washington had a drive early in the game. They drove right down the field and scored. After that, thought Michigan's coverage was excellent. They got pressure on the quarterback. Derek Moore with a beautiful strip sack and what I think was a fourth down play leading to a Michigan touchdown. When it mattered, they turned it on. And I give them a lot of credit for it. Much needed win. And now you have an opportunity to kind of work your way up. I've seen them back in the top 25. This is a frustrating team. And I said this in my post-game video after the game against Washington. I don't really know what they are yet. I knew last year's team was going to be a team that could only win rock fights because they didn't have a quarterback. And at this point a year ago, they had tried out 3 different quarterbacks, and none of them were good. They won games with 30 yards passing, I think, against USC, right? This is a different team. It is a better team, but I can't get a gauge on what their ceiling is. I think that they're pretty good. I don't think they're great, but I think they have the potential to be great. I think they have the talent to be great, but there's a lot of youth and there's a lot of inexperience that prevents me from saying that they're going to be able to reach their ceiling. And part of it is, look, they got some tough opponents. One tough opponent left on their schedule that is just a wagon in Ohio State. You talk about a team that I think might be better than last year. Boy, oh boy. But for the time being, they've saved themselves from being in the crosshairs of a lot of criticism. So shout out to Sharon and that group. Now, look, all that's undone if you lose this Saturday, right? Like, I mean, I already have my questions about Sharon. He might as well, not get back on the bus if they lose this game to Michigan State. That kind of allows me to transition now to Michigan State, who lost 38-13 to Indiana in a strange performance just because, look, they got destroyed, right? And Indiana pulled away, and outside of a quarter and a half in which Michigan State was moving the ball pretty effectively, you saw all the same issues that have existed with that team all year. Their defense is Swiss cheese. They don't wrap up. They don't tackle. They allow chunk plays. They allow long, sustained drives. I mean, it's not a good defense really whatsoever. And the offense, well, that's the most consistent, quote-unquote, unit on the team. Even they've been remarkably inconsistent at points. They look great in the first quarter and a half, then completely fell off. Indiana adjusted, and as people have pointed out before, Jonathan Smith, if we're just talking in terms of point differential, has been arguably the worst, power 4 coach in the country at making second half adjustments. The guy just gets steamrolled in the second half of games, and you saw that against Indiana. But the reason I think we're sitting here talking about a team that still has Jonathan Smith leading their program is, as bad as it was, and it shows how much they've fallen off. I think that if Michigan State would have gone out against Indiana and gotten destroyed and played the way that they played against UCLA, I don't know if he would have a job right now. The one positive I can take away, boy, oh boy, is this a backhanded compliment when talking about a team that lost by 25. The one positive I can take away is that I got the impression watching that game against UCLA that that was a group of players that had quit on their coach. I did not get that impression on Saturday against Indiana. I still don't think they're well coached. I still don't think they're very good. And the roster is a mess. And the makeup of the roster, especially in the modern age where you can upgrade through the portal with relative ease, the roster still hasn't, it's every bit as bad as it was last year. It's probably worse than it was last year. I mean, just because there's no excuses after that. Even the pieces you have, you completely failed to build around. So this isn't me saying he's done a good job, but if this would have been a 50-7 loss, like I think a lot of people would have expected or were expecting, I think that there's a chance he would have been let go before the Michigan game. But yeah, I mean, now Michigan State is playing in kind of a no-win situation because Michigan State fans they'll show up for Michigan. They will. But many Michigan State fans are checked out, and they've made up their mind about Jonathan Smith, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them whatsoever. This is a stagnant program that's not going anywhere, right? At least in this current regime. But if Smith beats Michigan, on the off chance that he does, how much longer is he the coach? I think that it would buy him time and probably would allow him to finish out the rest of the season. But pending some drastic turnaround, I still don't see him being the coach here much longer. And I really think a big part of that is the change in regime, the fact that you brought in Jay Batt to be the athletic director. And Jay Batt, similar to guys like, Scott Harris or any, somebody who's heading a program like this, you're going to take a look and you're going to see what's under the hood. And I don't think that Jay Batt came into this season with any preconceived notions. I don't think he came in saying, boy, oh boy, I can't wait to get rid of Jonathan Smith. I don't think he came into this season saying, boy, oh boy, I can't wait for this guy to be the coach here long term. I think that he's assessed what he had. And right now he's seeing a program that's stagnant. And that starts at the top of the head coach. And there's something obviously an athletic director can do about it. Weird things happen in this game. They happen every single year. Mel Tucker beat Michigan twice. Okay, a lot. Bobby Williams beat Michigan. So I'm not going to count it out. I do think that we will see a better version of Michigan State on Saturday because, like I said, I didn't get the impression that they've quit on their coach. But I felt that way in the 3-9 season as well. At the end of the day, there's just not a lot of talent here, and Michigan's going to do everything in their power to put pressure on Shiles and put pressure on that offensive line. And I've seen nothing from that offensive line that makes me, they couldn't, block Boston College. I don't think they're going to be able to handle Michigan. So look, Michigan is a team capable of self-inflicted wounds. And if they inflict enough of them on themselves, there's a chance that they could cough up this game. But Michigan State still needs to make plays, and their execution has been subpar basically the entire season. I don't want to end with a little bit of Tiger talk here. And I did many a video about, and obviously it blew up on social media with the John Heyman report that the Tigers were $250 million apart in their negotiations with Tarik Skubal. I'll be completely honest with you. I was surprised to see that they were negotiating at all. And it's one of those things where I think whatever frustration or sadness I feel is something I've already made peace with. I've been telling you guys for 2 years that Tarik doesn't finish his career here. He's going to be playing a heavy majority of his time in his major league career with another team. And I think that very much became a reality over this last week. Look, there's multiple things you could do, obviously. I think at this point, given the fact that he's headed to arbitration, given the reports that have come out, and given the situation that you're in, there's two ways that you can go about this. You can either say, we are going all in with Tarik, and we're going to sign as many guys as we can in this free agent class, and we're going to build, and we're going to put together a 9,500 win team made up of a lot of free agents and Tarik Skubal, and we're going to try to win next year. That's never been the plan for Scott Harris. That's never been the plan for Chris Ilitch, and I don't think he wants that to be his plan. Option number two is that you trade him. And of course, it's delicate. He's the best pitcher in baseball, and it's something we're so tired of. And I'm going to hammer this point home. Even if you trade Skubal and you somehow were to, quote-unquote, win that trade, it still sucks. It sucks, sucky, suckitude, suffer and suck attack. It stinks. Tarik Skubal's our guy, and he should be a Tiger for life. But I also understand how the business is. And as much as I love Tarik, and as much as I think that simplest solution would be to pay him, there is legit logic behind what Harris is thinking here. The Tigers, I think in their current age, I think that they've been guilty of this in the past. I don't think they view it as cheapness. I think they view it as bad business. I think in the eyes of Scott Harris, who acknowledges, and I would completely acknowledge how great Tarik Skubal is, in the eyes of Scott Harris, he simply believes that giving any player, whether it's a homegrown guy, best pitcher in baseball, what have you, giving any player 10 years, $400+ million is a bad business investment. That's just how he feels. He would have never given Miggy that contract. He would have never given Jordan Zimmerman that contract. He wouldn't have signed Javi Baez to that contract. What is frustrating now in this current point is, one, we've obviously grown so attached to Tarik, and two, who the hell are you going to pay? You know, if you're not going to pay your homegrown guy who's the best pitcher in baseball, who are you going to dish out a contract to? And I made a whole video about this, and I don't think genuinely that Harris, of anyone on the current roster, sees anyone worth paying. Sans maybe Dingler, and defensive ability has a lot to do with that. He plays the most important defensive position, but beyond that, I think the guys that they're going to try to pay are on the minors. I think that Harris believes that he is still a president who at the major league is dealing with another regime's players. And there's good that comes with that, and there's a lot of frustration that comes with that. The one thing that Harris has done that I will absolutely give him credit for, that Avila never did, is the second he arrived here in his opening day press conference, he made it very clear what kind of player he wants here. Okay. Now you got to execute and you got to get those players, right? Like if 2 years from now, this guy's still talking about controlling the strike zone and you have a bunch of guys that strike out, I'm not going to give you credit for having a mold. Like you're not finding guys who fit that mold, but he has an actual idea of who he wants here and the kind of lineups he wants to construct, right? Avila did not. Avila was, I see this guy, I think he's a good player, let's go draft him. And what you've ended up with is guys with high ceilings, but also very low floors. You know, I mean, as much as we like Green and Carey and Torque, we have seen these guys struggle mightily because they do not control the strike zone. And it's frustrating because they've been to the playoffs the last 2 years, and we're so sick of kicking the can down the road. We're so sick of having to wait till next year. And even with me defending his philosophy here, you still could have done a shit ton better than Chris Paddock at the deadline. You still could have done a shit ton better than Charlie Morton. That's going to haunt you, buddy. It's going to continue to haunt you. And right now, you're staring in the face of reality, which is the fact that what may define your era, which is how you handle this Tarik Skubal situation, is it's very much reality. Like I said, it's a move that is probably going to be made. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time, and they're going to wait for the winter meetings. But what happens to Tarik, I think in a lot of ways will set the market and will determine how a lot of teams assemble their rosters, really. I mean, I think that if the Tigers can get a few opening day players back for Skubal, and we're looking at a different roster, you know, who they sign and what they sign them to completely changes. So the Tigers don't even know what their rosters makeup's going to look like next year because you don't know if Tarik's going to be here. I know what we're hoping for, guys. I know that we're waiting for the change of heart, the big announcement. And maybe there is some agreements. Maybe there is some come to light moment. Maybe Tarik says, you know what? I love it here so much that I'll take less money. 99% of the time, I never believe in those kind of things. And I understand the fans' frustration saying, why doesn't he just take less money or do this? This is just how the business works, okay? If an employer comes to you and says, we'll pay you X amount of money, everybody would leave their current employer. Okay, it's just how things go. That's how it works in baseball. Now it's different in baseball because the money is so ginormous. But yeah, that's the reality of the situation. Frustrating, but the last point I'll make is ultimately the mistake they made was not having the balls, and maybe they tried, not having the balls to offer an extension after the 23 season when it was pretty clear that this guy was going to ascend to a certain level. I don't know if we expected him to be a back-to-back Cy Young winner, but that was their opportunity, and they didn't capitalize on it. Now you have to deal with reality. All right, y'all. That will do it for this week. I'll say this. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get those watch hours up. Available in audio form on Apple Podcasts, available in audio form on Spotify. And of course, CastellaniContent.com is being updated every single day with the content that Austin and I create. And of course, shout out to my friend Austin Sisler, who continues to do a wonderful job as the artist behind the lens, so to speak. Means a lot, and as does your continual support with all things. And I know we're kind of out of baseball season now, but we got a lot of stuff to look forward to. I haven't even talked a whole lot of college hoops. That's coming right around the corner. So a lot to be excited for. There's always plenty of stuff to talk about. And I promise you guys at some point, and I'll have to learn, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert, we're going to get Red Wings talk. We're going to get Pistons talk. I want all my bases, but I also don't want to bullshit you guys, at the same time. So we'll see what's up. But I'll talk to y'all again real soon. Have a great rest of your day.